Community. Create your own free poker profile and connect with poker players from around the world. Community features include your own personal blog, poker hand history replayer, share with others, community forum, discuss poker strategy and poker life, poker social network, interact with members.
About sort of intermediate pre-flop play that I really need to expand, or am interested in expanding on for you guys. One, positional play, how important it is, and how you really want to narrow your hand ranges when you're under the gun or in the blinds, and expand your hand ranges when you're in position, because you can really represent or leverage your positional advantage to take down a lot more pots. Secondly, the next thing I really want to stress about pre-flop play when you're starting out is why we want to raise when we're entering pots, and why limping is just pretty much a terrible play in any case when you're playing like 6 max, no limit hold'em. Like the reason why we don't want to limp is because by limping, it's similar to the King Jack offsuit where I chose to either raise or fold to a raiser. By limping, we narrow the range of hands that we can credibly represent to our opponents. So if we're limping, they can instantly start to narrow down the type of hand ranges that we have and really exploit our play, because they know that, yeah, we're not often going to be limping with our strong hands, and they know that we're going to be folding our weak hands, so they instantly can narrow down that type of hand range that we're playing, and really get to know, or deduce what kind of hands hit that flop, and then based on the flop texture, if they have position on you and they've shown aggression by raising, they can really hammer the pot down. And unless the flop texture really hits a limping range, like for example, if the flop comes down like 9-8-7 with 2 spades, yeah, that crushes a limping range, but a lot of times the flop will come down like a king 7 deuce offsuit type hand, and that just it doesn't hit a limper like almost whatsoever. So anyone who's raising pre-flop can take it down with almost their entire range of hands, because it very rarely hits a limping range. So we really want to be raising when we're coming into pots, because then we can credibly represent having a strong hand, as well as having a marginal hand. If your opponent starts to get a read on you that you're coming into a lot of pots, they're not going to know whether you actually have a strong hand or have a weak hand, and you can continue to credibly represent strong hands as well, because you haven't done anything out of the ordinary to make them suspect that, to be able to narrow down your hand range and take out the top part of your range, such as like premium pocket pairs. Now you might, I often get the argument, well, what about limping pre-flop with like my strong hands to make up for limping with weaker hands? And then I definitely argue against that, especially at lower stakes, because with your premium hands, you really want to start building the pot, even pre-flop, because you only have so many opportunities to really get the money in. And if I have a really strong hand, I want to start building the pot as soon as I can, because it exponentially, the pot size exponentially increases with the number of streets that you can raise the pot. So if I miss out on a street like pre-flop, raising the pot, then it limits the size of the pot that I can make, or how large I can grow the pot pre-flop or post-flop, and where I really want to get the money in. And if I'm making like a close to a pot size bet on every street, if I'm missing out on all the possible streets of betting, I can't get all the money in and really get maximum value for my strong hands. Now that's one important reason why you want to be raising for pre-flop. Now second, people are like, well, I want to be tricky, I want to mess up my opponents, they'll incorrectly identify my hand range. Well, I'd argue that by if you're going to be limping because you don't want to drive your opponents out of the pot and you want to be tricky, I'd argue, well, if they're folding all the time and you don't want to drive them out, you should be raising your more marginal hands more often, as opposed to playing your stronger hands a lot more slowly. Because if you're raising your marginal hands, that reduces the likelihood in their eyes that you actually have a strong hand when you do. So they're going to start to pay you off a lot more lightly when you do have a strong hand, because they're not going to be able to accurately identify your hand range. So, and then the benefit of that being that when you do have strong hands, you get to decide post flop, if you're being the aggressor, when to really build that pot or when to keep the pot small, play for pot control, if you have a marginal hand that you wouldn't mind getting to showdown. So that's pretty much the primary reason why we really want to keep the pot, or be the aggressor, and really build a pot when you have strong hands, and be the aggressor and come in raising when you're coming in. Now here's an interesting spot. I raise with a pretty strong hand post flop. I'm going to go ahead and call here because this guy, he's already 3-bet me before, and I think he's just kind of monkeying around a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I'm not simply just calling here with the hopes of hitting a flop and folding. There's a lot of flops that I'd make a move at, because I think this guy's hand range is not simply just 3-betting with like his marginally made hands, like with his strong hands. I think he could be doing this with a wide range. So if the flop comes favorable where I can credibly represent a bluff as well, I'm going to do that. So I have hit a strong hand here. I don't mind getting in here. I think that my pair jacks with top kicker here is definitely well ahead of his range. My check raise could look pretty bluffy, and if he does push me all in here, and I'm definitely going to be calling, and I do lose, like, I'll just chalk it up to I happen to end up hitting the top part of his range. But I've already determined before that he's been splashing around, like he's already 3-bet me before. Like, I don't think, because of that fact, I don't think he's just doing that with his premium hand. So I don't mind calling a raise there with ace jack, and then playing some poker post flop. It is going to be tough in those kind of situations because you're out of position, but I think that's why you need to have like a reasonably strong hand that connects well with flops, as well as the fact that you have to be willing to steal some favorable flops to you. Now, favorable flops that I would steal are even flops like that, where it's just they have a really hard time connecting with any sort of hand, like that jack deuce deuce hand. Unless he's actually sitting on like an overpair, he's not going to be happy with his hand. Now, I happen to actually flop well, or connect well with that flop. But I think a lot of the times he's sitting there 3-betting me. He's seen it.